So this is a spooky, Halloween horror game. We'll look back at Amnesia, The Dark Descent. Yeah, so this is simply a classic horror, like classic horror video games. Like, it has like good gothic castle type themings, you know, has a dark color palette and good like shadows, has a lot of good level design, has a lot of variety. I'd say this is like the best at I don't think horror games are really scary because like it puts you in control. But I'd say this is the closest it gets. It's one of the best at scaring you. And I think a big part of that is the no objective marker. You have to explore the map, and it sort of leads you to create your own scare sort of by finding the enemy behind you and whatever. The enemies don't feel like they are like on such a little stealth game rotation. They feel like they're more wandering. Sort of like Mr. X did in Resident Evil. Oh, well, he wasn't really wandering. He's more surprising. There's not really much of a story, but that's fine. It's sort of like Gothic Castle, and stop like evil magic apocalypse, whatever. It has a good sense of weirdness, sort of that Skyrim type thing, or sometimes people's weirdness is just like whoa, sort of more mysterious weirdness that sort of like in games. Puzzles are mediocre. Not really much to say about that. People say it's slow at the beginning, but I didn't really notice when I played it. Of course, like people maybe less patient, This doesn't really work for the YouTubers who play the first hour and get scared, like in Outlast. Which Outlast really degrades after its first hour or so. Anyway, so it's a good classic horror. It's really commit to randomness for the better scares. It's really great theming. That's about it. I'm gonna give it a 8.81. That's it.
It's going over Amnesia 2, A Machine for Pigs. This is a very disappointing sequel. It shows how you can make a similar game with much less quality. The gameplay is the same and the story is similar, but the horror is way off. The levels don't let you wander as much to make your own scares. There's still a little open, but it's not quite the same. And the enemies just really don't work too well.
Oh, yeah! It's a pig man! A pig man!
The pigmans just aren't scary. And there's a little variety with them. It's pretty much the same basic pigman every time. The last one's a little different. It's a little better, but it's not like it's anything in the first game. And these ones variety really kept you on their toes. Don't know what's coming around. I'm expecting this as a big part of horror, and this game just doesn't have that. Aesthetics aren't as good either. There's too many well-lit areas, and Amnesia Rebirth also had well-lit areas. I feel like it used them better. Really sort of like, they were like very well lit, and they're used to let you calm between horror segments, and also it had a dark area right away. This game doesn't have dark area for a good bit. It did have a few interesting locations, like the old timey town and the old timey factory. But it's still not as good and has less variety in the other one. And another thing pretty bad about this is it's very short at only about like 4.5 hours. Overall, pretty disappointing sequel, and I'm giving it a 6.0.
They were reviewing Amnesia Rebirth. So this was the last episode for Halloween, so happy Halloween. Yeah, this is a pretty good game. I'd say it lives up to the original. It moves at a slow pace, but still, but it doesn't lose your interest. It keeps you involved. The lighting mechanics are returned from, and after playing Amnesia 2, it makes you realize how important they are. They're really good. This game has a good use of darkness like the original. The puzzles are still decent, but they're nothing to write home about. The horror hide and seek gameplay still good, but it just isn't quite as new as it used to be. So doesn't quite have the same impact it did when it was first came out. The game does have some good scares and horror, but not as much as the original. Although I'd say it's better than most horror games. The story is better and more involved than the original. But it's not as good as Soma. It doesn't have as much interesting questions. There are some interesting concepts with the idea of what is selfishness, sort of, brought up at the end. But it's not as good as Soma. Aesthetically, this game is very good, has a great atmosphere, both in the old real world, and the Cthulhu-esque alien cities. The alien dimension is particularly good, with those barren rocky plains and the green light going throughout for all of it, on top of these stone cities. There's also very good creature design. There's not a lot of creatures, more than Machine for Pigs, which only have like 2. But they are some pretty good designs. Overall, this game does do some things better than the original, but it's not as scary. And for that reason, I don't quite like it as much as the original. But overall, it's a pretty good game. I'm giving it an 8.68. So that's about it for that. Alright, so today we're talking about Amnesia the Bunker. This game is a great mix between modern hide-and-seek type horror and classic survival horror. I don't really find it that scary, but I usually don't find much horror games too scary. But this game is pretty good at building tension, though. It's not trying to make you ask, is the monster going to show up here? It wants you to ask, am I prepared for when the monster will show up? This game's sort of like if an R2 remake, Mr. X was the only monster, but he's more dangerous and all the resources go to fighting him off. I like how it makes you think of it more tactically. The resources in this game are really good. They're all multi-purpose. It's like, do you want to spend the cloth on making bandages or put it toward a Molotov cocktail? Bullets are fairly rare and are loaded one at a time into your revolver. So you better make sure your gun's loaded before fighting. Resources are not only for fighting out the monster, though. For example, grenades aren't just for making the monster go away. They can also be used to open wooden doors. There are 2 sort of off things, though, about fighting the monster. One is that there are these explosive barrels you can move around, and you're supposed to shoot them to hurt the monster,
but if the monster runs into them, they just explode. But so it's always more effective to lead them in the middle of the hallway rather than shoot them, which is weird. The second thing is once you've hurt the monster enough to make him go away, it takes a moment for him to realize that. He's like, oh yeah, I'm hurt, I'm supposed to run. There's also these big, in terms of monsters, there's also these big evil rats, which are annoying, but I like how menacing they are. This may seem cruel out of context, but it is pretty fun to pour the gasoline on them and throw a flare at them and set them on fire. Also, getting damaged can cause you to leave a blood trail, which leads enemies, including the rats, to you. The rats can be real mean. Rats trying to eat an injured soldier while they're still alive does sound like some sort of messed up World War II story. There's also good lighting mechanics in this game. You got like this wind-up flashlight thing, but the noise it makes slowly attracts a monster, so that's a good balance thing. There's also a generator in the safe room, which can light the whole bunker, but only for a limited time. And so I usually only turned it on when it was required for a puzzle. The puzzles are fairly good, as usual for Amnesia, by the way. In general, there's some good items unlocking items gameplay, like in Resident Evil. There's even sort of like the RPD lockers in this game, where you find codes to unlock lockers with resources. For much as I like the rest of this game, the story is pretty mediocre. It's a fairly standardized Amnesia story. The World War I bunker does make for a pretty good setting, though. It provides a lot of good aesthetics. There's also a bit of Roman ruins, which are good. As always with Amnesia, there's good use of darkness, keeping things sufficiently spooky, but also allowing you to see enough to get around. Also, the monster design's fairly good. There are a couple of small technical problems. The main thing being, when you enter an area, the game will sort of stop for a second to reload. I also fell out of the world once. I also have to admit, in my game, Silicon Shadow, I do have that same reloading issue. But I'm just one guy and not a sufficiently funded studio. Also, this game is relatively short at about 5 to 7 hours for $25. But I would much rather have a shorter game with less left than a longer game. Overall, this game is good and a unique blend of survival horror and the Amnesia series. I'm giving it a 9.01. Thank you to anyone who likes, comments, or subscribes. That's it.